but what I was saying is that the like say you have like New York City, the language of like you're really savvy, someone from New York City, nothing of the African language or the American African language or the combination thereof or the conjunction of the influences of New York City is lost, because just like when you have a child, one thing that's arbitrary is when people say that they're half this, they're a third that, they're a quarter than that, according to this and me, right? That I think that that's bogus, because you are what you are of any of your ancestors is the best of them, and it's not a fraction of them. You're the best of you're a particular iteration of your parent and their ancestors, but that iteration that you are, it constitutes, and it's not different or isolated from the best that is your parent. So you're the best of your parents. You're not half of your parent and half of your other parent. You're the best of both your parents and all your ancestors, like that. So that's I think that's why that's actually I tried to express that one time to some people that were calling themselves biracial. That's what I would be classified as, because my parents are from dual ethnicities but also dual races. Race itself is arbitrary in social programming, but ethnicity is less so, but still more profound and transcendent than can be appreciated normally by human beings, and from that standpoint, arbitrary. But my parents are I'm of African and European ethnicity that constitutes what you would call biracial. But I was trying to tell some people where they began a racial dialogue based on my hair when I walked in somewhere, because at that time I had blonde in my hair, and so they were talking a racial dialogue in earshot of customers, and I piped in my 2 cents, which was a little bit of a foul pas and a blunder to do so. But what I was trying to communicate is that as I think that what is hard for people who are biracial, but the best part of you, the best blessing, your real blessings, they begin as hardship and struggle sometimes. And what is your gift, it can start as your curse, but that's part of the training and the seasoning that amounts to your gift. But a lot of people who are biracial, I think that, and myself at times, they have struggled to come to terms with the reality, the blessing that is them. But also other people can similarly struggle, because we're that arbitrary in our notions of inheritance, that I think is a function of feudalism and in like dividing property. The notion of a father, brother, sister, brother, a second cousin twice removed, that neatly breaks down on paper as inheritance goes, but that's not the reality of a human being. A human being is all of humanity. You're one. According to India, when you enunciate any letter, right, you actually can't enunciate a vowel without. So you have anything that moves. You have a static component and a kinetic component. Vowels are appreciated as being kinetic. Vowels are more expressive. They're more forceful. They're more profound. They're more beautiful. They're more transcendent than consonants. But they're also not viable without consonants. Different cultures break down differently in leaning towards consonants and vowels, and it similarly breaks down as they would be either patriarchal or matriarchal. It's been said by Taj Street Bay, Dr. Umar Johnson, such that African language itself, which is very poetic and beautiful, both in Africa and in African American language, and some of the music that's possible with that iteration and mode of English and language. It emphasizes and it leans into and it's loose around and it plays with and it's creative around vowels, but also it's matriarchal. Both Africa and American African culture is matriarchal. You don't mess up around ladies. You don't mess up around girls. You don't mess up around ladies. You don't mess up around your mom. You don't mess up around no females like that. You don't damn near even you don't raise your voice around females generally. That was my experience as a boy around like friends that around communities of African and African Americans. You don't mess up around girls like that. That's matriarchal like that. But the Eurocentric culture is more patriarchal in that, and there's more of turn taking and talking, according to Dr. Umar Johnson, and that has to do with feudalism. I think the realities of feudalism and being beholden to different manners and feudal the way that people would break down between peasants and different degrees of nobility it goes along the male, it transacts and transcends and inherits along the male line, such as the reality of the culture is patriarchal. That may not be natural to human beings. I think that human beings are fundamentally matriarchal because women are more formidable and also more convincing, generally speaking, than men are in the strictest sense. Women are profound, and things really start and stop, or don't start at all, or don't stop at all because of women. But in Europe, maybe because of the realities of the winter and also agriculture, it amounted to being more patriarchal, and that's probably not different than an independent of the development in the history of the church like that. But that language is more so leaning on the consonants when it's patriarchal like that. But your consonants are not viable without vowels. Neither are your vowels consonant viable without uh, um, uh, consonants. And any letter that you would enunciate, you actually similar to sound. If you say you take a C, like you take the letter C, a lot of people would say like, "Oh yeah, they were talking this and that," but I got overtones. Like I kind of got I kind of got an undertone that there's a little bit of an undertone. People don't know what they're actually saying when they say over or undertone. You have an over and an undertone series of any sound whatsoever. Because as you would make any sound, like you actually can't make a pure sound of any kind. It's interesting, they have this guitar out right now. It's like it's a special kind of guitar. I forget what it's called. It's like a new kind of guitar. They try to make that sophisticated, where it's like more of a I forget it's an atonal. I don't know if it's atonal. It's like a more clean, dry guitar that's supposed to be like good for like your. It's a microtonal guitar. They have something called a microtonal guitar. So like in India, I had a music teacher who was a vocal teacher. His wife was a vocalist, and he himself was also some form of musician, and they both taught at Berkeley. And he was saying that the only time in this life that he's ever been awestruck or impressed by a musician had been a musician from India. I think he was referring to Ali Akbar Khan. He has an actual college there's a school in San Francisco that exists. Actually, if you wanted to learn a Carnatic Indian, I'm not sure if North or South Indian music is called Carnatic, or what that school is, North or South. I think it's North Classical Indian Music. Rather than go to India, there's a school in San Francisco, but also currently they're only online. I think that's Ali Akbar Khan. He was a real maestro. If you appreciate, his father put him up to the way that he wanted him to study, and he wanted him studying like 18 hours a day of music, if it's going to be music at all. That's what he wanted for him, and that's damn well what it has to be now. I'm not saying anybody has to practice 18 hours, but if you had it your way, or if you had any opportunity, you damn well should be practicing 18 hours a day, if not more, if you want to be calling yourself musical anything and have the chops to go with that. But that's in the spirit of Ali Akbar Khan, and he has that school in his honor in San Francisco that's available online. But my teacher had never been impressed by anything but that person, I think. And they do the micro, and also I took lessons. There's another platform. I can't think of the name of it, but I took lessons there. And my singing also, just like, it's interesting, my guitar playing never went anywhere until I transacted lessons with a classical teacher from Slovenia in the Minneapolis area, and to my vocal chops never went anywhere until I contracted a classical Indian teacher. There's a platform that allows you to take lessons from people actually in India via streaming, and they charge a lot less because money goes further. The rupee isn't as strong as the American dollar, so you can transact like 10 to 15 lessons for what would be about like maybe 5 lessons in America with this platform. And the kind of insight that he gave me, but also his spirit and attitude and approach to music, that actually was a difference between me being getting to be a vocalist and not. Is that I've now been doing more singing, but uh, um, it wouldn't have been tractable, and it didn't become real for me until I met that teacher. And it's interesting that they both converged at the same time, because I was flirting with lessons at the beginning of 2024 with my classical teacher, but he was in and out of the country. But I really got on with him in the summertime, and the beginning, the first shoot of the plant of my chops, of my creativity and writing and playing and fingerstyle as a guitarist was at the latter point of 2024, the summer. I had some lessons with him superficially, cursory, over the beginning of that year. But it didn't. But as Moses, but then I had a couple just straight in a row lessons, and I had breakthroughs at them lessons at the end of that summer of 24. Then at that very time, I started taking lessons at near about the time when I began my own apartment, and I had the confidence to have my own apartment and the know-how based on that classical guitar teacher too. He said anything you do, it got to be incremental like that. But that the convergence of the breakthrough with the guitar and the vocalizing with the teacher in India, they were both classical. So that's actually a word to wise. If you're interested in something, anything, I recommend go the classical route. You want to do acting chops, whatever it takes to be classically trained. You want to do music, go the classical route. You want to be an artist, whatever that means, go the classical route. You want to be anything, go the classical route if you want to go anywhere. I'm not saying the contemporary stuff is not worthless or that it didn't play into it, but for me, nothing had been real until it was going to be classical, if anything. But they got this guitar now that's called the microtonal guitar, and they're emulating and they're claiming that it helps with that those actual the sophistication in the actual like that Indian music. But that's actually a broader pedigree how they do that those microtones. Like they would call it like plaintive or pleading, like that kind of like plaintive, like it's very beautiful, but it's also it's a sophisticated, very nuanced and highly it's very nuanced and virtuoso, but it's not impossible if you they have a history and they have insight into how to practice that to be versed with that. But now they have a guitar. But even if you had a microtonal guitar or a regular guitar, which is not essentially microtonal, you whenever you would enunciate any note, you're actually enunciating all notes, but all notes differently based on whatever note. It's almost like all notes contain all notes, but at different angles and at different conjunctions and combinations of all notes that would give you the real eccentricities and characteristics that would constitute one note. So when you're hearing a C, it's going like this, and then it's coming back and it's going under and it's going like this, and that's what gives you some of your sophistication in harmony is the actual, you could say that harmony is not actually the combination of different notes in unison, it's the overtones and the undertones as they redouble and they compound. It's kind of like if you can imagine like a river, if it's the same as a river actually, because it's just a different form of the same motion. Water would be a different form, it's actually the same as sound and air. Air is like a finer grade of what water is, but the sophistication of the ripples of water, like say in a way in a lake or in a river, that's actually what's taking place with sound, such that my voice sounds different now. I had a family member complain because my voice sounds loud, but it's because of the nuances in this particular auditorium of this this hallway, and how the sound would echo and also redouble, so my very voice, it'll have different overtones and undertones in one auditorium or vicinity than another. Like say out on and sometimes the eccentricities of an auditorium, it helps the sound. So like some producers, they'll make music in like weird places like a kitchen or a bathroom because it'll help with the sophistication of what the sound's doing if they know what they're doing or if they're fortunate. But so you actually can't make any you can't make any pure sound. There's no such thing as pure anything, not least of which sound, because it's actually you. It doesn't stop with anything. It's so broad. It's kind of like you hear some people say like they're outside with it. So you can be anything in your mom's bedroom, right? You can be anything in your mom's spare room, right? But when you go outside, it becomes real because you can't control all the angles that you're seen from. You can't control all the angles that you can access a place, that you can leave a place, that you can be perceived, that you'll be discussed, that you can be re-perceived, re-discussed. So it goes on and on like that. Even that's actually the case even in your mom's room. But still, when you would go outside, it just becomes profound and vast and endless and infinite. And such is actually sound, but also such is ethnicity and that you like when you're any ethnicity, but sometimes it's more it's more perceptible in someone that is what you call bi. There's no such thing as race in the first place. So there's bi-ethnic. You can be bi-ethnic, not biracial, because ethnicity. I mean, race is a social control artifice technique of actually of delusion and fiat. and it plays into our realities in economics upon fiat. The notion of race does. But ethnicity is just another word for human. You could say ethnicity is the eccentricity and the reality of family and see, all of life is both heterogeneous and homogeneous. That is same and different. You can't have, if things were completely heterogeneous, that is different, they wouldn't be compatible enough, life wouldn't be viable. If things were completely homogeneous, that is the same, things also wouldn't be viable. They wouldn't be robust enough. They wouldn't be changing, developing enough. So you need a combination of heterogeneity and homogeneity. That's what human families are. Your family members, but also your family group and cohort and beyond that comes from, is some combination and iteration and reality of both heterogeneity and homogeneity. You are a lot like your siblings and also your ancestors, your parents and beyond, and your cousins and your children. But you're also different while the same, that's what reality is. But it amounts to what you would call ethnicity and some of and the sophistication of that makes life yet again diverse but also cohesive is the dynamics of family. A lot of skills run in families, a lot of shortcomings run in families and on like that. And so it's such as human beings, as you go closer and further out, yet broader than human beings, to other beings, other categories and schedules of beings, such as what you call species like that. It's actually the same thing, and it probably be broader as the planets go and the stars go like that, is that all things are connected, yet also things are simultaneously and to different degrees connected and independent. And if things were completely cohesive, they'd be stuck, not viable. If they're completely independent, it'd be chaos. So it's some kind of beautiful combination of chaos and order. The chaos not being viable without order, the order not being viable without chaos, such as also the reality that amounts to what you would call ethnicity like that. But it's also that you're just like in any sound. So according to the East in India, any sound contains, any letter that is, contains all other letters, but the other letters are they're implicit and they're dormant, but they're still present. Otherwise, you couldn't actually different. If you didn't know, or there's no such viability of the other letters, then whatever letter you're emphasizing, so you may emphasize a letter, but you may not isolate a letter. You may emphasize a feature or a type of person, but you may not isolate a type of person. But then also with that, you are the best of your ancestors, and not the least of it. So if all people are actually bi and multi-ethnic, because whatever people you come from, they would have to have some diversity and some intermingling and commingling and remingling and near about non-mingling to be viable. So all people are constituted of different ethnicities, whatever region they come from, whatever culture or people they understand themselves as. Those very people would have been fighting and conquesting and being conquered and assimilating assimilating and diverging constantly as to be what you call ethnic. But like I'm saying, race is arbitrary, but ethnicity is the realities and the sophistication of homogeneity and heterogeneity that is life. But such that when you see the person that you're calling, that you would say multi-ethnic, to the point of, in modern fiat terminology, biracial, they are all of the best of their Caucasian ancestors, all of the best of their African ancestors, and the unique blessings and combinations and transcendence and creativity that is their combination, that is inevitable in life and what makes life viable, such that you can't isolate them as white. Again, white and black are actual legal designations. White meaning sovereign, and black meaning colored or alienable outside of a recognized nation. But outside of that, you can't lay a finger on those people, and neither can those people lay a finger on themselves, thinking in those terms, because that's too limiting and too divisive. But it's the same with people who don't understand themselves as as mostly racial and or ethnic is that they are also the same. They're the best of all their ancestors, and they are also diverse. So I just wanted to level that one there. The I'm about to land this, but the last thing I want to say is that one of the things that we struggle from, like back when I was saying the connotative and denotative language, in our part, some of the fiat that is the delusion that also that sets and gives the backdrop of our economic dealings, which is all of our life. There are things that are taken for granted and are completely bastardized and misconstrued by intention, by training, that make a lot of our dealings not viable, such that, like I said, a lot of people, you would fight about your notions of white and black, not knowing that those are actual legal and caste designations that have implications, but they don't have a reality in themselves. And when you take them as reality, that further makes complications that amount to real conflict and strife, or just simply ignorance and or lack of cohesion or misunderstanding. But also you have the when you have a need to limit. So just like you, not only do you have people who are privileged, but you have people that are not privileged, but it serves a purpose for people to be underprivileged. So it's like you would think of being privileged as just like this special thing that you get to do, and being not privileged as this thing that you don't quite get to do. But that's not the case. Being privileged is a positive privilege. It's an affirmative privilege. It's a guaranteed privilege. It's a fail-safe privilege. It's need to be privileged for the broader system to be viable. As is, to be underprivileged is not only to not get to be privileged, but to be damn worthy, to be actively sabotaged, actively undermined, actively that is oppressed, and such that you may not be viable or tolerated is not only is it not viable and tolerated, therefore possible for you as a person that is designated classified as a minor, that is less than majority, that is an actual minor. The same way, the same contempt that you would have for a minor trying to make decisions for themselves, trying to vote. Imagine how crazy it would look for a minor to walk up to a voting poll and fully expect to vote, right? That's actually how you're calling yourself and how you're looked at when you accept the title of a minor, because that's what you're also saying. You're saying as bogus as it would be for a minor to walk up to a voting poll, that's how bogus it is for you to think yourself an adult and act as an adult if you're classified as a minor. If you think I'm lying, go try to present yourself and speak for yourself in court. You look like that. You didn't do nothing wrong, right? You didn't think to do nothing wrong. You don't even know how to do nothing wrong. But you go up into a court and you try to answer for yourself, and you look like that much of an idiot as a minor walking up to a voting poll. That's because you are accepting the actual designation and status of a minor to call yourself that, such as that you draw the repercussions, and you are entitled to the repercussions of acting as a bogus colored minor if you understand yourself that way. And that's exactly how you're treated. So like for today, for example, I have procured at times, and I had an actual what would be constituted as a personal library in the type of musical texts, and also different nonfiction texts that I procured in the last 5 or 10 years. But because of hard times, I had to divulge them and consign them to a local bookstore at a fraction of their value, but still to get something. But then I walked into a rare bookstore today. The actual most of the books that I brought to that consignment store, they were either outright rare books, or they would be rare even as contemporary books, because when I got them, they were like the last one on the damn internet when I got them. So they were already rare, even though they're technically modern edition published and contemporary books. So I actually gave them an actual authentic rare library at the damn consignment store. But then I walked into a rare bookstore today, and these people, when I walked in there, they were so short with me, so contrary with me, as to you would wonder if they the way they approached. Now I didn't look bad, right? But I looked like a minor. That's what I looked like. Not so I was dressed right. I had my whatever swag or whatever, but I looked like a minority. That is a minor. So they talked to me the same. If you can imagine a person that doesn't know how to read past Dr. Seuss, or just hasn't graduated high school, walk into a college, because some of these are better books than you would have at a college, at a at a rare bookstore, you can find better text than you would at an Ivy League school, a word to the wise. But you walk in there and they're as frustrated with me for me being there as an actual person at a voting poll would be with a minor being there, because they simply think you must be a minor, and they probably haven't met many people that they think that look like me, that can actually, that has read a book of their own choosing as an adult. But I've been through a lot of books and I enjoy writing books. But that just goes to show you is that in this society, we're not respected for being members of majority. We're not expected for literacy, and we're not respected for speaking denotatively. But then even people that understand themselves as denotative, I bet you, right, go up to a voting poll, right? We just recently had an election. I bet you if you polled I live near a voting poll. I bet you if you polled every last person that walked in there, um, my neighbors included, local professionals included, local doctors, local lawyers, local politicians. I bet you none of them know what the hell COVID means. I bet you none of them know what those letters mean. Those letters are an acronym, but it's also a little bit similar to connotation, because when you say COVID, you think you're referring to an actual strain of something. COVID, this is the strain. COVID, it's called COVID-19. That's not what those letters mean. According to Tashreeq Bey, those letters mean Certificate of Vaccination ID, and those were known before the onset of that. That is the rollout of that debacle, and the actual the machinations of that, as is can be appreciated. Just if there were prior knowledge to it enough to call it COVID, knowing that there would need to be a vaccine before there had been a problem, that's some form of machination. But that's how connotative, but also fiat and bogus a lot of our realities is, that we don't know what we're saying. That's just simple examples. When you say okay, you don't know what those letters mean. When you say the very candy M&M, you don't know what those mean, because you haven't. I just simply looked into it. M&M stands for Mars and Murray, but you otherwise don't know what the hell you're saying out your mouth when you say M&Ms. Neither when you say COVID, neither when you say the IRS, because according to Tashreeq Bey, when you say the IRS, you're referring to not the Internal Revenue Service, not the Internal Revenue Service, the Inquisition Revenue Service. That is, you're paying your tithes and fealty to Rome in the present day. You're actually, so when you go to church and they tell you to pay 10% of your income as tithes, you're actually being fleeced at that point, because you had already paid tithes in the form of taxes. When you pay taxes, you are still paying tithes to Rome. So for a church to hit you for more of tithes, they just actually fleece you, because that's a bogus transaction. Is that you think you're paying 10% of your income. You already did that with your taxes. And then also, like, say US would be, I'm not going to go into US because that's going to sound that's going to sound like that's going to change the tenor of this if I explain what the letter US means. Also, when you say America, you further don't know what you're saying with America. According to Tashreeq Bey, America refers to Morocco. It has to do with Morocco. And were you to know, like, say you were to say you were mixed up with some kind of like fraternal order, because we know it's not a secret now that people like to talk. Everybody, so you got different levels of things, right? You got the church, right? But then the church needs some form of regulation. You have any form of power. You have the above ground, the official, and the de facto, the veterans, the implicit, the implied, the non-spoken or underspoken, but it's still power like that, right? So as a church is not only ran by the clergy and the officials and the administration of the church. It is not. It is also ran by the people of the church. That is the deacons, the ushers, on duty and off duty, and also the influential members, the cool people, the attractive people, all those people. And some of their meetings, they occur at these tea parties and these Bible studies of old. I've extrapolated. But then also, it doesn't stop there. Then it further goes on to the coffee shops. You have different types of like, I had a neighbor who worked at a bar, and one bar is not the same as another bar according to a bartender. You have dive bars, you have college bars, you have lounges, you have all different types of bars that have different patronage, different kind of conversation, different airs. You have like the green, I think it's called like Greenwich. Some places will have a scene, like you'll have an artist scene, like in you had the great Bob Dylan, who comes from he comes from the areas I referenced, northern Minnesota, but also he can get through the Twin Cities. He gets through the Twin Cities. He can, Bob Dylan. but he was having spending time in New York in the like in the back in the day when he was in Sway. I think he never had to not be in Sway, but he stepped out of the limelight for his own reasons, and maybe he should be commended for that. But you had different like artist scenes, and some of them would be about cafes. So even a cafe itself, it can have dual purposes. It can actually have sentiments and airs of artistry and real social life and bantering, like dating and stuff like that. That's part of the ambiance and that's part of the function, but that's not the only function. That'd be like the light side of it. Then you also have the bantering, the backbiting, the conspiring, the conniving, the conceit, the organizing, the espionage, damn near the intrigue, and damn near the what's it called, conspiracy. Like sometimes one of the serious things that a person can be accused of is conspiracy. There is such a thing as conspiracies, right? When I was about to say the U.S., when you say the letters U.S., you're referring to unum sanctum. That's the actual that's the conquesting, that's the crusading arm of the old Catholic Church that never ceased. And so a lot of these wars that take place abroad, they're still under the auspices and the authority and the provision of unum sanctum. That's actually what's taking place. So when the troops and they have, yeah, U.S. on their soldier, that actually is what they mean when they say U.S. That is unum sanctum. These are the objectives of unum sanctum to the present day. Um, but but you do have such a thing as conspiracy. And so when I would say something like that, that would sound like conspiracy. But conspiracy is it can be a reality such as that it's actually a scheduled designated crime. But you imagine that anytime conspiracy has taken place, it may be different now with technology, but especially in the past, would it not likely be somewhere near around a cafe or a bar? If people are coming together to conspire, right? I'm not saying it's only limited to a cafe and bar, but it would not be convenient. And is it inconceivable that of all the real verifiable conspiracies that have taken place of old and to some degree of present, were they not close to a bar, a lounge, a cafe? In the olden times, like say the witch hunts, or when the church was really influential, were they not far away from a Bible study or a tea party? So that's some of the function of these settings, these closed, private settings, gatherings. But it doesn't also stop there because you also have cigar lounges. You have a golf club. What the hell is all this business about golf football? All these powerful, well-to-do rich people, they want to stand around and hit a stupid ball around some grass with a stick like that, good to go like that. You buy that one. I'm not saying that can't be fun, but one is that it's known, according to Justin Gaethje, the mixed martial artist, of all the things that have the most attractive fans, like you have like manga, you have Comic Con, you have different sports, you have damn well Eminem MMA that he's part of, you have music, rock and roll. The one that has the most beautiful fanfare pound for pound is actually golf. If you actually really know, that's probably some of that's not actually, it's not inconceivable, but it's not a far stretch to think that people that would be golfing are also the people with the most money, baby, the most pull, baby. And also golf is a lot of skill too, if you're being honest. They're classy people on all, and the truest sense of that word, on all levels. Golf is about class. So it would figure that that's where the most beautiful fanfare patronage is. But also golf is convenient for these closed settings like that. Then going beyond that, you have more and more sophisticated and influential and discreet and clandestine cohorts of people like that. And then they're about power, right? What is organizing or group about anything but power? But also knowledge is power. So they would have access to resources of learning that you would not know. So when I walked into a rare bookstore, that's almost near about close to some of your higher tiers of knowledge that are not available to the general public. So I walked in like a general public, damn near minority, if I think myself that way, and I divulge myself that way on paper. You let this actual minority in and around our actual clandestine resources like that, that could be a point of conflict, and that's actually what my experience was. Hang on, I'm on a live broadcast right now, so anything you say is going to be broadcast on the internet. But uh, but in those venues, right? Those very venues of restricted access and prestige and opulence and influence and power and clout and pedigree and stature, landed wealth and success beyond what we can normally be appreciate as civilians. You would have people that actually mock, ape, emulate, um, and reiterate the great people of old, the great masters of old, the great libraries of old, the great understanding of old, such as the very Moors. So like you would when I say that America is what you're saying with America is a amalgamation or an iteration of Al Morocco, according to Tashriq Bey, you say, man, you sound like an ass, you sound like an idiot saying that, right? But when you graduate, right, you go to university, that little tassel on your head like that little thing that hang up, does that not remind you of the Moors right there? That little thing that hang from your head, the very graduation cap and gown itself, the cap, and that thing that hang on the side, does that not remind you of the Moors, of the cap that the Moors wear? Such is also the deeper insight that they had, the library, the know-how that they had, the mastery that they had, the sovereignty that they had, the power that they had over the geographical region of the United States, and to different degrees, the Americas and Africa and Europe, the actual very Moors were displaced and unseated. And according to Tashriq Bey, when you say the Reconstruction era of the South, you're referring to the reconstruction of history, not the infrastructure of the South, the reconstructed history. And that came to a head with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, according to him, is that Abraham Lincoln himself was a person of, he had some African ancestry, and he was the country itself, it was founded differently. You had at least a couple iterations of presidents before George Washington. I bumped into an actual I bumped into someone, a statured person, the most of stature that you can imagine, while not being an elected official or without being an elected official or a famous person, the most of a stature person that you can run into in your community. I ran into such a person and had a conversation for on end for a few hours across a day, and he asked me who I thought was the first president, and I said that I didn't know, but I know there had been at least been two or three, or between 2 and 4 iterations before that, and he was flabbergasted that I'd be aware of that, and it's just simply because I had come across Tashriq Bey, but like that, just like you don't know the actual the pretext of the real founding of the country, but also along that line, upon the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, you had a successful coup d'état where the older guard that had a lineage and that was a function of the actual power and sway of the Moors. It was completely and utterly defeated and cast off at the time of the slaying of Abraham Lincoln. And it's also interesting that, do you call the America a democracy or republic? Do you? So we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands. But nowadays you would say that we have a democracy, not a republic. When did it go from a republic to a democracy? I think that's near about the time. I'm speaking very generally and roughly. I think that's an example of how the very words, they show the real history. If you look at them, is that yes, it had been called a republic when they wrote the Pledge of Allegiance, but now we refer to it as a democracy. When and how did that change? You don't know when and how that changed, because that's not available. It's available because it's on YouTube, but it's not known to the general public lexicon. And that happened there. What you're calling Reconstruction is the coup d'état, the successful coup d'état of the last. I think the real word for president is praetor. So Abraham Lincoln represents a praetor from that older republic. And it's also interesting how the Democrats now, they had formerly been the more, I think, right wing and also racist party. The Democrats had been, and the Republicans had been the more liberal of which, and that also switched. I think the fact and how and when that switched, it corresponds with what Tashriq Bey is referring to as the changing of the guard with Abraham Lincoln, and what's called Reconstruction, and the actual effacing and confiscating and deletion and rewriting of history upon the time of the Civil War. So the Civil War meant more than it did than what is shown to you. The real pretext and the real reality and aftermath of the Civil War is different than it's generally presented. And the closest insight I have would be Tashreeq Bey upon YouTube. But as he always says, do your own research. So it doesn't start or stop there. But what's more significant is that a lot of we. So what I'm saying is that as a minor, as a person that's appreciated as a minor, you will not be respected for speaking denotative, and you will be ridiculed, mocked, and you will draw conflict if you speak in denotative language. But if you speak in connotative language, you will also draw repercussions because you will come into conflict and contention because you're actually speaking out of ignorance, to different degrees of ignorance. If you're leaning into connotation, such as to refer to a home or a house as a crib and whatnot, and actual some of the imbuing of language and what that means to real social and human outcomes when you speak connotative like that. So what I'm saying is that so from that standpoint, when we don't know what we're saying, we're dealing in fiat. Fiat is to present currency as money, but what Tashreeq Bey says is that the entire society, the education, a lot of the economic dealings, all of it, so much as it is falsifiable and bogus, and fraudulent and intended to be so, such as to control to maintain power, it will cause imminent, constant, and recurring conflict. So some of our very conflict is actually a function of our ignorance, and I don't say ignorance derogatory, is because we have actually been brainwashed and forced to partake in brainwashing and a reality, a paradigm upon that can't help but compound and cause difficulty. Because as long as you're dealing in ignorance, you're gonna have a thorn in your foot. So as long as you approach a snake like a eagle, you're gonna get the problems that come with calling. So that was actually a deeper metaphor than I intended, because America is appreciated as like an eagle is the national like animal, but you could probably say more realistic would be a snake. So you're treating a snake like an eagle, as America goes. But but I was just saying that the Twin Cities, it's a case in point for a lot of conflict, and now I've been seeing conflict about like because some of the multiculturalism of the Twin Cities, it's been coming to a head, and so I just a little bit I leaned into the reference that the municipality of Stillwater, they had the choice to accept the prison or the state school back in the day, and they chose the prison because it's maybe about as lucrative as the state school, but less of like the politics and different stuff that come with the state school. So the state school went to the Twin Cities, and some of the realities of putting the state school in the Twin Cities, it makes the opportunities of the Twin Cities, but then also on a deeper level, like it gave you some of the atrocity, like I'm extrapolating of Philando Castile, in that he was slain in a place where different precincts converge, but also it's upon farmland in the middle of the city, which would tempt people to speed, which would place more of a police presence there, which would be a more likely place for you to be pulled over. Then also that climate, that atmosphere of that famous atrocity, that couldn't help but play into and correlate and correspond the then later slaying of George Floyd. That was the preempting and almost nearby sacrificial scapegoat that would rise and stir the world to stand up to lockdowns, to congregate and come together, despite the injunctions about isolation. Then that would maybe affect the trajectory of the pandemic. And so I'm saying that the only thing that's significant about that is just the fact that part of these things, they have to do with the opportunities that the land affords itself, how the land would fashion and necessitate or inspire there to be two cities here, St. Paul and Minneapolis. Then some of the further ambivalence and the contrast, but at times conflict and rivalry of the zoning of municipalities, St. Paul versus Minneapolis, but also the robustness and the opportunity that comes with that. All that converges is a very sophisticated pot to make the Twin Cities a canary in a coal mine, and a case in point for the broader dynamics of the country and some of the ambivalences and the redemption and the silver lining and the blessings, all that together, that amount to whatever is topical. The Twin Cities is a case in point for that. And now it's a lot about immigration, citizenship, and viability, but also some of the respects and the accommodations around like different creeds and different practices and different lifestyles that are coming to a head. But the deeper underpinning is that you don't appreciate what the church has to do about that, and you don't appreciate what the church has anything to do with that, because the church is like this nefarious thing that you don't appreciate how it affects things. What I'm saying is that America itself, right? America is ostensibly a free country, but there's been a lot of conflict here. But it's also a very appropriate country. That is, appropriateness is what rules. It will hold sway. People will argue with any lawmaker. They'll argue with any politician. They'll accept many lifestyles. They'll accept many practices, many creeds, many faiths, many statements, many dogmas. But they won't let anything fly that is not appropriate. I didn't say inappropriate. I said not appropriate. Because when you go on to inappropriate, that is actively not appropriate, such as to actually constitute a real breach of some form of decency, ethics, etiquette, and actual law. By the time something will be ostensibly and verifiably confirmed as inappropriate. But just simply what is appropriate or not, when something is appropriate or not, it doesn't all the way get into the point of being inappropriate, but it's outside of the regulatory norms of the culture. And what I'm saying is that those norms are almost verbatim, spot on, not different than they had been at any point as the actual puritanical Christian background of the country goes. And that the only difference is that the only difference between, see, what I'm saying is that presently and back in the day, right? You can walk into a church, you can confess bloody murder, right? That you either receive clemency for it or did not. That doesn't make very much difference, if at all, to a church unless they're mandated to have a stake in it. They don't care what you did, what you might do, what you could do, what you know about. They don't care anything about that. The church doesn't care about that. You could almost say that what's great in this life also doesn't care about that, because you have you have compassion